The road stretched north like a promise no one intended to keep. Silas Thorne drove with both hands on the wheel posture, straight eyes scanning terrain out of habit rather than interest. 43 years old, 6'1", gray-blue eyes that had seen too much and stopped looking for answers 3 years ago. The Montana winter pressed against the windshield. -10 degrees. The kind of cold that didn't ask permission. It just took. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And please like and subscribe for more stories about loyalty, faith, and the courage to stand when running is easier. The truck was a 2008 Ford F-150 forest green with rust blooming along the wheel wells and a crack in the passenger mirror that spiderwebbed like frozen lightning. Everything Silas owned fit in the bed under a canvas tarp: 2 duffel bags, a footlocker, a toolbox he hadn't opened in months. The math was simple. The less you carried, the less you could lose. He had come to Montana with the last of his savings, $17,000 after selling everything else. The apartment in San Diego, the furniture, the dress uniform he would never wear again, the engagement ring he'd bought 4 years ago for a woman whose name he no longer said out loud. 17,000 bought 50 acres of nothing, forest land 3 miles outside a town called Ridgeline. Population 412. No cell service past mile marker 7. No neighbors within shouting distance. Perfect. The town appeared gradually the way forgotten places do. First a scattered collection of homes with smoke rising from chimneys. Then a gas station with pumps from the 90s. A post office the size of a garden shed. A diner with a red neon sign that said open, but looked like it meant maybe. Silas pulled into the gravel lot and cut the engine. The silence hit immediately. Not peaceful silence. The kind that waited. He stepped out. The cold locked around his lungs. First breath burned. Second breath hurt less. Third breath, the body learned to survive. He zipped the olive field jacket to his throat and pulled a knit cap over his hair. Dark brown cut short, going silver at the temples faster than it should. He'd earned every gray hair, some in daylight, most in dreams. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fry oil and old wood soaked in decades of conversation. Warm air hit his face. 3 people sat inside. An elderly couple in a corner booth moving food around their plates more than eating it. A younger man at the counter in a Carhartt jacket, back hunched, hands wrapped around a mug like it was the only thing holding him upright. Silas chose a stool near the door. Exit visible. Windows clear. Old habits. The waitress appeared from the kitchen. 50s, maybe 60s, with tired eyes and a smile that had survived too many winters to quit now. Her name tag said Dolores. Coffee, black, Silas said. Food, just coffee. She poured without comment. The mug was heavy ceramic, chipped at the rim, hot enough to make him shift his grip. He drank, bitter, overbrewed, exactly what he needed. Dolores leaned against the counter, assessing him the way small-town people do. Not rude, just thorough. Passing through, staying. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Staying where? Bought land, east side of Coldwater Lake. The Harmon property, if that's what it was called. She studied him for another moment. That's rough country. Nothing out there but trees and rocks. Good. The word landed heavier than he intended. Dolores didn't push. She topped off his coffee and moved to check on the couple. The man at the counter turned slightly, glancing at Silas with bloodshot eyes before looking away. Everyone here carried something. Silas recognized the weight. He paid in cash. Left $2 on the counter. Stepped back into the cold. That's when he saw them. Across the street near the corner of the post office, an old man stood with his shoulders hunched against the wind. 70, maybe older. Thin in the way that suggested meals were negotiable. He wore a brown parka patched at the elbows with duct-tape jeans faded to the color of old denim, left too long in the sun, and boots wrapped in cloth strips for warmth. His hands were bare, red, raw. At his feet sat a German shepherd, black and tan coat, ears forward, eyes amber and sharp. She sat perfectly still, body angled protectively around 2 smaller shapes pressed close to her belly. Puppies. 3, maybe 4 months old. One lighter in color, bold-eyed, shifting with impatient energy. The other, darker, quieter, watching the world with a gravity that seemed too old for his size. The old man held a piece of cardboard, handwritten in uneven letters. $5. Silas stopped walking. He had seen begging before. He had seen it in Kandahar and Kabul. He had seen it in San Diego under freeway overpasses where men who'd served slept in tents made of tarps and hope. This was different. The old man wasn't asking. He was offering. People walked past. A woman in a puffy coat, a teenager with earbuds, A man in a suit that looked out of place in a town this size. They all looked. Then they looked away. Silence, Silas thought, was always safer than compassion. The German shepherd did not whine, did not bark, did not perform desperation. She simply sat there, still as held breath, her body a living shield between the puppies and the world. Her eyes tracked movement, cataloged threats, waited. Silas felt something tighten in his chest, a familiar sensation, the one that used to mean incoming fire. Now it just meant memory. He crossed the street. The old man looked up. His eyes were pale gray blue, tired, but not empty. "Help you," his voice was rough. Not from drink, from cold and years of not being heard. Silas looked down at the dog. The German shepherd lifted her head. Their eyes met. Hers did not waver, did not beg. She held his gaze the way a soldier holds a perimeter, with certainty, with discipline. There was a scar on her right hind leg, old, healed poorly. "She yours?" Silas asked. "She found me," the old man said, 6 months back. "Near the old federal land east of here. Been with me since." Federal land, closed off, has been for 20 years. She just walked out of the woods one day and sat down next to me. The old man paused. "She chooses who she stays with." Silas didn't believe in signs. He believed in logistics, in cause and effect, in consequences that didn't care about your intentions. "What's her name?" "Don't know her real one. I call her Raven." The dog's ears flicked forward at the sound. Not trained obedience, recognition. "The puppies." Flint and Cinder, boy and girl. Silas looked at the cardboard again. $5 for a mother and 2 puppies. In weather that could kill. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a 20. Held it. The old man stared at it, then shook his head. "I said 5. Take it. I'm not a charity case." "Didn't say you were." They stood there in the cold. 2 men who understood that dignity wasn't about money. It was about having the right to refuse. Finally, Silas folded the 20 and put it back. He pulled out a $5 bill instead. Held it out. The old man took it. His hands shook. Not from fear, from the cold that had soaked into his bones and wouldn't leave. Silas looked at the dog again. Raven was still watching him, measuring, deciding something. "I'm not buying them," Silas said. His voice came out low, steady. The voice he'd used to give orders in places where hesitation meant death. "I'm inviting, one night, you and them. Warm. In the morning you go wherever you want." The old man's eyes flicked to Silas's face. Suspicion and hope crossed in quick succession. He looked down at the mums, then back. "Why? Because it's -10, Silas said, "and I've got a roof." Raven stood. She took one step forward, then stopped. She lifted her head and locked eyes with Silas again. This time something passed between them. Not understanding, recognition. She had seen men like him before. Men who moved carefully, who watched corners, who carried weight they couldn't put down. After a long moment, Raven stepped back and pressed her side against the puppies. It wasn't acceptance. It was permission to continue. The old man exhaled. The sound carried more relief than he probably intended. "Tobias Crow," he said, as if names mattered again. "Silas Thorne." They didn't shake hands. Didn't need to. The drive out to the property took 20 minutes. Tobias sat in the passenger seat, hands tucked under his arms for warmth. Raven sat in the extended cab area, body blocking the space between the humans and the puppies. Flint tried to climb over her to see out the window. She corrected him with a gentle nudge of her muzzle. Cinder pressed close, nose tucked under Raven's chest, eyes half closed, but alert. The road narrowed. Pavement gave way to gravel, then dirt, then 2 tire tracks through snow that hadn't been touched in weeks. Trees closed in on both sides. Ponderosa pine and Douglas fir, the kind of forest that could swallow sound. Silas's hands were steady on the wheel. His jaw was tight. They passed a hand-painted sign, "Private property. No trespassing." "You really bought this land?" Tobias asked. "Last week." "Why fly now?" "Needed space." "From what?" Silas didn't answer. The silence stretched. Tobias let it. The cabin appeared at the end of the trail. Small, 1 room, logs chinked with concrete that had cracked over decades. A stone chimney on the north side. 2 windows, one facing east toward the lake, the other south toward the forest. No electricity, no running water. A hand pump outside for well water. An outhouse 20 yards into the trees. It wasn't much. It was enough. Silas parked and killed the engine. The silence returned, heavier now. The kind that pressed against your skull if you stayed in it too long. He got out. Tobias followed slowly, joints stiff from cold. Raven jumped down carefully, then turned and helped the puppies navigate the drop. Flint tumbled. Cinder landed perfectly. Raven watched both with equal attention. Silas unlocked the door. Warm air spilled out. He'd left the wood stove burning low before he drove into town. The cabin smelled like cedar and smoke and cold fabric. "Come in." Tobias hesitated at the threshold. Old instinct. Old pride, bossy. "Go on," Silas said. Raven crossed first, head up, alert. She moved through the space methodically, checking corners, sniffing the air, marking exits. Then she sat in the center of the room and looked at Tobias. All clear. Tobias stepped inside. The puppies followed. Flint immediately began exploring, nose to the floor, tail wagging in clumsy arcs. Cinder stayed close to Raven, watching everything with dark, serious eyes. Silas closed the door. The sound was soft but final. The cabin was simple. One room divided by purpose rather than walls. A narrow bed in the corner, a small table with 2 chairs, a wood stove that crackled and popped, shelves with canned food, a first aid kit, ammunition boxes, a rifle mounted above the door. Clean, oiled, ready. Tobias stood in the middle of the space, shoulders still hunched, as if waiting for the warmth to betray him. "Sit," Silas said, nodding toward the table. Tobias obeyed, slowly lowering himself into the chair like a man who'd forgotten what furniture felt like. Silas moved to the small propane stove near the sink. He filled a kettle from a jug of well water and set it to boil. Pulled out 2 tin mugs, opened a can of soup, poured it into a pot, set bread on the table. The movements were efficient, practiced. Military precision carried into civilian life by muscle memory. Raven positioned herself between Tobias and the door, not blocking, watching. The puppies settled at her sides, Flint's chin resting on her foreleg, Cinder pressed against her belly. "She's trained," Silas said. "Not a question." "I don't know," Tobias replied. "She just knows things." The kettle whistled. Silas poured hot water into both mugs with instant coffee, handed one to Tobias. Their fingers didn't touch. Tobias wrapped both hands around the mug. His shoulders began to ease. Fraction by fraction, the warmth finally breaking through. They ate in near silence. Soup and bread, nothing special. But Tobias ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might vanish if he moved too fast. Silas ate standing, leaning against the counter. Another old habit, always ready to move. When the meal was done, Silas poured water into a metal bowl and set it on the floor. Then he opened a can of wet dog food, mixed it with kibble from a bag, and placed it near the water. He'd bought the supplies in town without thinking about it. Now he understood why. The puppies ate first. Flint with enthusiasm, food scattering. Cinder with deliberate focus, each bite counted. Raven waited until they finished. Then she ate, quietly, never lifting her eyes fully from the room. Silas watched her, the discipline, the patience, the way she processed every sound, every shift in air pressure. "Where did she really come from?" Silas asked. Tobias set his mug down, looked at his hands. They were shaking less now. "I told you, near the old federal land, east of the lake." "What federal land?" Tobias's jaw tightened. For a moment he looked like he might not answer. Then the words came, slow, heavy. "I used to work for the U.S. Geological Survey. 30 years. I was good at my job." He paused. "In 2002, they sent me to survey land for a resort development. Right here, Coldwater Lake region, beautiful area, good for tourism, good for the local economy." He looked up, met Silas's eyes. "I found contamination. Deep contamination. Uranium mill tailings from old weapons testing in the 60s. The readings were off the charts. Groundwater was compromised, had been leaking for decades." Silas said nothing. He knew where this was going. "I filed a report, sent it up the chain. 2 weeks later, I was reassigned. My findings were classified. When I pushed back, they pushed harder." Tobias's voice cracked. 43 people got sick that year working that land. 12 died. They called it bad luck. Blamed it on age, on lifestyle, on anything except the truth. "You tried to stop it." "I tried. Then they made me go away. Lost my cum, lost my reputation, lost my house. My wife left. My daughter stopped returning calls. By 2005, I couldn't get hired anywhere, not even as a consultant." He looked at Silas. "They didn't kill me. They erased me, made me invisible." The wood stove popped. A log shifted. Sparks danced behind the grate. "That's why you're here," Silas said. "Someone had to remember. Someone had to keep the proof. Tobias gestured vaguely. I spent 2 years gathering copies, hiding them. I knew they'd come for the originals, so I hid everything I could. Old abandoned federal property. Nobody goes there. Nobody looks. Until now. Until now. Silas picked up his mug. The coffee had gone cold. He drank it anyway. What about the dog? She found me 6 months ago. Just walked out of the trees near the old test site. Sat down next to me like she'd been waiting. She's been with me ever since. Tobias looked at Raven. Dogs know things we don't. They can smell sickness, danger, poison. She knew what was in that ground before I told her. Silas felt the tightness in his chest again. Not panic, recognition. I'm not a hero, he said, voice flat. I don't fix things. Didn't ask you to. Good. They sat in silence. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. The kind of snow that erased tracks. Tobias's eyelids grew heavy, the warmth finally breaking through exhaustion. Silas stood and pulled an old wool blanket from a shelf, draped it over the old man's shoulders. Bathroom's outside, 20 yards south. You'll see the structure. Tobias nodded. Silas gestured toward the bed. Take it. Where will you sleep? Chair's fine. I can't. You can. Tobias didn't argue. He moved slowly to the bed and lowered himself onto it. The springs creaked. He pulled the blanket tight and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing deepened, sleep that came from finally being safe. Raven rose and positioned herself between the bed and the door. The puppies curled against her warmth. Flint sighed dramatically. Cinder's tail thumped once against the floor. Silas sat in the wooden chair near the window. He didn't expect to sleep. He rarely did anymore. The night stretched. The cabin held its breath. Silas sat with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely, eyes open. He listened to the wind, to the crackle of the fire, to the soft sounds of breathing. His chest tightened, the old ache, the one that came without warning and left without permission. He counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique they taught in the VA, the one that worked half the time. It didn't work tonight. The tightness spread. His lungs forgot how to expand. His vision narrowed. Heat flared up his neck. Cold rushed back in. He knew what was coming. He'd been here before. 100 times. 1,000. Then Raven moved. She rose without sound, crossed the room in 3 steps, stopped directly in front of him. Silas looked up. She was close. Close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body, smell the scent of her fur, see the old scar on her leg. She sat, back straight, head level with his. Her amber eyes locked onto his gray-blue ones. She didn't whine, didn't paw at him, didn't perform comfort. She just sat there, breathing, slow and steady, in, out, in, out. Silas's breath began to follow hers, unconscious at first, then deliberate. In, out, in, out. The tightness eased, the heat faded. The walls of the cabin widened again. Raven didn't move. She held his gaze for 30 seconds, then a minute, then longer. When his breathing finally steadied, she turned and walked back to her place beside the puppies, curled around them, closed her eyes. Silas sat in the chair shaken. He had not asked for help. He had not known he needed it. The dog had decided otherwise. The rest of the night passed without incident. Dawn crept in, pale, tentative, light spilling across the snow in thin bands. Silas rose before the others. Always did. He added wood to the stove, made coffee, stood by the window watching the forest wake. Behind him, Tobias stirred, coughed once, sat up slowly. Morning, the old man said. Coffee's hot. They drank in silence. Comfortable now, the kind that didn't need filling. After breakfast, Silas pulled on his jacket. I need to check the property, make sure the boundaries are clear. I'll stay here, Tobias said. If that's all right. It's all right. Silas opened the door. Cold air rushed in. Raven stood immediately, ears forward. Alert. Stay, Silas said. Raven didn't move. She looked at him, then at the door, then back at him. I'll be back in an hour. He stepped outside. The snow crunched under his boots. The air burned his lungs. He walked east, following the fence line he'd walked 3 times already since buying the land. Behind him, he heard the door open. Raven stepped out. The puppies followed. Silas stopped, turned. I said stay. Raven sat. Flint and Cinder tumbled into the snow, immediately distracted by the cold and the newness of everything. But Raven didn't take her eyes off Silas. Fine, come on. She rose and fell into step beside him. Not behind, not ahead, beside. The puppies scrambled to keep up their short legs, working double time through the drifts. They walked for 20 minutes. The forest was silent except for the crunch of snow and the occasional cry of a raven overhead. The real kind. Silas scanned the tree line. Old habit, marking sight lines, escape routes, threats. Then Raven stopped. She stood perfectly still, ears forward, body tense, not aggressive, alert. What is it? She didn't move. Flint bumped into her, tried to keep walking. Raven growled, low, sharp. The puppy froze. Silas looked in the direction she was staring. At first he saw nothing, just trees, snow, more trees. Then he saw it. A shape. Wrong. Unnatural. Half buried in the snow and overgrown with moss and dead vines. He moved closer. Raven followed, but slowly, with visible reluctance. It was a rail car. Old. Rusted. The kind used for freight in another era. It sat in a shallow depression, tilted at an angle as if it had been dropped from the sky and left to rot. Trees had grown up around it, through it in some places. Decades of decay. Silas approached. Raven stopped 10 feet back. She wouldn't come closer. Her body was rigid. Hackles slightly raised. Easy, Silas said. She growled again, not at him, at the rail car. Silas examined the exterior. The metal was pitted with rust. The door was partially open. Jammed. He pulled. It shrieked, moved 6 inches. Enough, he stepped inside. The interior smelled like metal and earth and something chemical he couldn't place. Light filtered through gaps in the roof. Moss covered the floor. And in the center, partially covered by a tarp that had long since rotted, was a metal case. Silas knelt, pulled back the tarp. The case was military, sealed, stenciled on the side USGS, property of federal government. He opened it. Inside were documents, files in plastic sleeves, yellowed but intact. Maps, soil samples in glass vials, photographs, and a handwritten letter on lined paper. Silas pulled out the letter. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, desperate. If you find this, trust the dog. She knows where it's safe. She knows where it's not. Follow her, don't ignore her. I made that mistake once. Others paid for it. The contamination is real. The cover-up is real. They buried the truth here, along with 43 lives. Don't let them bury more. T.C. Silas read it twice. His hands were steady. His mind was not. He looked at the photographs. Workers in hard hats, smiling, young. Some had red X's drawn over their faces in mark.